Welcome to the Free Money Podcast. This is the show where we explore what's keeping the world from investing in progress, answer the questions on the minds of people in the know, and give you the Brooklyn Bay Area consensus about institutional investing that you desperately crave. Serving up the latter part of that, I'm Sloan Ortel.
And I guess I'm doing the former part of that. I'm Ashby Monk, and I'm coming to you from Stanford University, where we study the sovereign funds and pension funds and try to make them approachable.
Oh, wow. Wow. I caught a glimpse of this rarefied environment earlier today, dear listener. And let me tell you, it is stunning.
Oh, yeah. They really treat us nice. I think your comment was, are you at a co-working space?
I mean, they gotta stick to the brand, Stanford is startups, right?
It is. Yeah. No, it is not filled with mahogany or leather-bound books. It's pretty functional.
But startups make me think of risk, right? Because they're always trying to raise more cash, trying to kind of get around the next corner, and of course most of them fail. We were sort of chatting earlier. I found this slide, on Zero Hedge actually. Shout out to Tyler Durden.
Once again, back there.
I come out as a stealth Zero Hedge fan. But the Deutsche Bank equity strategy team put together a slide with 30 risks to markets in 2019, and 17 of them have happened, and yet here we are. What is going on?
Here we are. The 30. You sent me the 30 risks, and in reading it, I have no idea what to make of it all. I think I had this flashback to when I was first on Wall Street. After my first stint as being a student, I then went off to Wall Street for, I think it was 3.5 years. And I can remember people telling me that good news was bad news. And that bad news was good news. And just my mind exploding to be like, I don't understand why good news is bad news. And then the answer is obviously everybody has different expectations, and some of the risks are going to be priced into the market and some won't be, and some will be a surprise. And it's the surprises that will, cause volatility. And so I have to admit, in looking through the 30, risks you've sent through, who knows whether or not these are going to impact the market and in ways that we can't predict, or what's priced in, or what investors' expectations are for these things. The fact that they're written down on a piece of paper tells me somebody's already priced them in.
Yeah, exactly. It's the old buy the rumor, sell the news, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. So I think, I don't know what you think, but this is one of those moments where I would love some insight from an outsider.
God. I'm so glad you said that. Because I don't know how many intelligent comments I have about this, except for of course, to say that gosh, it seems dangerous out there, and people should probably bring a towel
or an umbrella or something.
Yeah, exactly.
They're gonna get wet. It's like the comedy show with the guy who used to smash the watermelons.
Oh yeah, Gallagher.
What's the watermelon guy who smashed?
Gallagher.
There you go. Financial markets. It's like going to a Gallagher comedy show.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So who
should we call Rick?
Call Slick Rick? So
Rick Bookstaber. Yeah. He is slick. He's a chief risk officer, and he's a buddy of mine. And I texted him to see if we could call, because when you presented this idea, I was pretty blank. So he agreed. It's fitting that we're talking last week about how much we pay for a phone.
I'm giving him a ring right now. Let's see.
Here he goes. See if he picks up.
Oh.
Yeah. Hi, it's Rick.
Hey,
Rick. You got Ashby and Sloan. How's it going? Where are you?
Good. Well, I'm in New York right now looking at a rainy sky, so I'm sure it's bright and sunny out there.
Yeah, I have to admit, I don't see a single cloud in the sky.
Yeah, so every time you talk to somebody in New York City, you should ask them, how's the weather there? And then you can talk about how wonderful it is out there in Palo Alto.
There you go.
Rick, it's like that's the recurring theme on this podcast is it's beautiful where Ashby is, and it's either super muggy or just desolate back here in New York.
Sloan's in Brooklyn, right?
Oh, is that right? Oh,
yeah.
So
I lost sight of Manhattan for a little bit today.
Oh, there you go. So, Rick, we're trying to make sense. Sloan found a sheet that listed off 30 insane risks that could have the potential to blow up people's portfolios, and it includes a bunch of the ones that I'm sure you're tracking as the chief risk officer of the University of California, but also in your kind of guise as a technology founder and an opinion writer. And so we thought we'd call you and ask you about how you're thinking about risk. And I think the first question we have for you, and won't take more than 5 minutes of your time, is what do we mean by risk? When you're kind of thinking about risk, what is your definition? Because I'm not sure we have the right definition.
Yeah. So when I'm thinking about risk, because I'm in a pension fund, I'm not thinking about the day-to-day gyrations or little bumps in the road where there's going to be a quick recovery from it. I'm looking at things that are either longer term sort of secular issues that can change the characteristics of the markets on the one hand, or else things that are severe enough that it could lead people to make decisions that are short-sighted, where somebody should be talking them off the cliff, and they ought to just be sitting back, but they might not want to because it seems like the world's about to end.
So then you're basically saying the risks you're worried about are the ones that change everybody's expectations about the future, or push them into some irrational type of behavior that then can cascade through markets.
Yeah, and change the long-term picture, right? So it's not about something being disappointing for a quarter or a year, but maybe the base reality of an industry or the base kind of relationship between two trading partners is changing.
Right. So it's sort of the typical ups and downs that occur that are measured by sort of standard measures of risk, like value at risk. We measure that. You need to know that about your portfolio, but that's kind of risk 101 and is not really where the issues are. The issues are more in sort of a change in the state of the market or a move or a scenario that's so unusual or extreme that it would change your behavior. And especially if it changes it inappropriately because you don't really understand the risk correctly.
So let me here's an example of a risk on this slide that we found. Number 15 of 30 is U.S.-China trade war escalates further, which you betcha. But how would you think about that in from a sort of longer term viewpoint?
Yeah, so there's an example of a risk that everybody knows about. It's going to wend its way through the economy. People can kind of see how it might affect things. And the thing to ask with the trade war is, okay, let's say that persists. You want to ask, and then what happens? What is the follow-on effect from it? And does it affect markets more broadly? Is it just leading to a downturn? Does it help precipitate a recession? So that's a risk that is out there and everybody knows about it, and people can generally make adjustments. So I guess it's kind of like a known risk. And there's nothing, the odds that there's something subtle that everybody's missing is pretty small at this point because everybody's picked all over it. So you don't want to ignore it, but I don't know that anybody's going to jump off a cliff if it persists.
So you mentioned that value at risk is like the 101. Is the 200 level class here then the scenario planning toolkit? As a long-term investor, are you trying to stress test your portfolio with different scenarios like China trade war?
Yeah. So the sort of the intermediate class would, in the risk course book would be looking at scenarios and looking at stresses, things that might be unusual that aren't typical of the past. And then you get to the graduate level where you go into the question of, okay, when that occurs, how could that then propagate in other ways? What is the dynamic that's implied by it? So when we talk about a problem and a scenario, you have to kind of, as I mentioned before, sort of ask the question, okay, if that happens, then what's the effect after that? And will that effect create feedback or cascades and have second order implications? That's really where, the interesting component and the valuable component of risk management comes from. Because the 101, the introductory and intermediate courses basically are a matter of engineering at this point. There are a lot of systems out there that can deal with that.
And so that advanced course, is that the work that you've been doing around agent-based modeling and trying to understand how these effects move through markets?
Yeah, that's really from when I started working on this when I was at the Treasury after the financial crisis, working on kind of improving the financial system, improving stability. And the one thing that was apparent is that it's not so much knowing what's going to happen, but when that happens, how it cascades. And so that's when I started to use these agent-based modeling methods. And I use them now at University of California. And what they basically allow you to do is create a computer-based artificial world that hopefully represents the nature of the actual world with agents that look like the different institutions and the different sorts of investors that we have. And then when you impose some sort of a scenario or shock to that agent-based world, you discover that certain investors behave a particular way, and when they trade, that changes the markets in ways that then affects other investors who might then change the way that they borrow or lend and so on. So you can see how things work through the system.
So if you're one of those diversified investors who we all strive to be, you could then sort of see if you have stuff in your portfolio that has offsetting second order effects. I guess is that sort of the idea?
Yeah, or actually, that you have positions that normally are diversifying, which is of course what you want, but when things really end up turning negative, and when you really need that diversification, maybe suddenly they end up being more correlated. That's more the issue that occurs, that diversification works really well until you really wish you had it. And that's the time that the effects in one market propagate out to affect another market, and markets that might have not really been highly correlated typically or historically suddenly seem to be fused together. And, the risk your core risk management tool of diversification suddenly fails.
And at that point, you need a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right?
That's right.
You do, Rick. For those that don't know Rick, he is a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which I assume comes in handy as a chief risk officer. Last question for you, Rick. Have you run your agent-based model with one of your agents as Boris Johnson?
We'll do that one next.
That's that. Do you have any views on Brexit? Are you worried? Are you guys thinking about it?
That's actually, so if you think that everybody's crawled all over China to try to understand the risks of that, the Brexit issue is even more front and center. And, everybody can have a different opinion, but it's, I think it's somewhat baked into current expectations. And I don't know, how the market will move in either case, because it's not clear what the weighted average of expectations is. But the bigger issue there then is when that happens, what are the consequences that are implied by that? Because there's already this arising xenophobia and kind of a breaking up of globalization. And that might be more not a warning shot, but a first shot in an ongoing move towards a more xenophobic and lower globalized system. And that, of course, can have long-term implications for profit margins and, have long-term risk implications.
Gosh, so, I guess I know Ashby said last question. Can I sneak one more question in?
Do it.
Because I'm a terrible person. I just wonder, we've been talking mostly about macro risks, right? So stuff that affects basically every portfolio on the planet. I wonder, if there's an example of a more idiosyncratic risk that would be kind of, specific to, a given portfolio and, how agent-based modeling plays out in that case.
So if you have a risk that is very centered, so let's take India as an example. So India is kind of having a baby version of 2008 right now, as far as I view it. If you have a portfolio that's highly concentrated in India, or you're worried about India, that's India. You don't need, if you had all the other agents in the world all acting the way that they act, probably there wouldn't be a lot of pass-through from an event in India to a broad set of other investors in other markets. The people who are in India and leveraged in India and also are holding, say, China, are going to maybe have to start to sell China because their India positions are under pressure. But, what percent of people who are in China also have highly leveraged positions in India? So I think if you have a market that's very specific and is not kind of broadly held in concentrated forms, if it doesn't have natural links to other markets, then you really can do a simple stress test and sort of say, what happens to my portfolio if India goes down 20%? Well, I have $100 million in India, so I'll lose $20 million. And, in that case, that's kind of the end of the exercise. So agent-based modeling really is important in the obverse cases of what you're talking about, where people are in markets that have a lot of linkages and connections, and where people who are in the one market tend to be in others, and where there's leverage piled on top of that.
Gotcha. So it's an overlay for, kind of the risks that lots and lots and lots of people face to sort of add a deeper level of analysis.
Right. Yeah. And where it's really hard to deconstruct what's going on because you have these sorts of different types of investors coming from different sorts of institutions, being funded by different sources. And it's hard to really weave your way through to understand how one effect will pass through to affect another market. That's where the agent-based approach ends up being important.
That's awesome, Rick. Well, look, thank you so much for taking some time on your Friday night there.
Yeah, seriously.
For those that want to hear more about Rick, he wrote one of my favorite books of all time called The End of Theory. It's new, and it has a lot of it's not that new. I guess it's 2 years old, but it's newish as Princeton Press. And he's, building a lot of stuff around agent-based models. So Rick, thank you so much. And we'll catch up soon.
Thank you, Rick.
Thanks. We'll see you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Rick. Bye.
I feel a lot more prepared to address the risk of having 100% of my portfolio in cryptocurrency now.
I think I do too. I think it's basically agent-based, bing, bang, bong kind of stuff, it's what it is for me, a reminder that I have no business being a chief risk officer. You need chops on a level that I do not have those chops. So Rick's amazing. He's really, really nice to, take 15 minutes out of his Friday night to chat with us. So that was awesome.
Yeah, that was really awesome. And yeah, I mean, I personally feel, just like I can now not think about, all of these, risk outlooks that come out every year, which is sort of what happens every time I think about this stuff in any detail.
Yeah, I think he gave us permission to ignore Brexit, basically, at this point. Didn't he? I think he might have.
We should send him a fruit basket.
We should send him a fruit basket or our soon to be launched powdered beverage, which we're not talking about yet.
Total secret. I mean, and gosh, I wonder, is it legal to send through something so awesome through the mail?
It may not be. We may need to hand deliver that just for the sake of all of our sponsors.
Yeah, exactly. Well, but for luxury beverage such as that. And exactly. For those listening along, we're totally serious.
We are actually putting together a beverage.
Oh man,
I know what time that is.
Oh yeah, I think it's time for Dear Ashby.
All right.
When we start talking about luxury beverages, I think there's only one thing to do, which is take questions from the listener.
Yeah, it's that time. All right, let's see if I can answer these ones.
Oh my God.
What do we got?
Okay, so this first one is kind of interesting. And it takes place, there's an Indian angle to this. So, yet again, not planning these episodes works out great. I am an Indian citizen, but my family has kept money in Swiss bank accounts since my grandfather's time. As of this month, the government has all of my account details, and I'm worried they're going to take my money. Yeah. What can I do?
That raises a lot of questions. I think the first question that raises is whether the money's there illegally, sitting there in a Swiss account, or like otherwise, why would the government take it? I love that this is the question that we get. I think my first reaction is that
ethics more clear.
Yeah, I think we should. I think maybe you start with an email from you, this person, to literally anybody that you have an active email address for, and you should say something about how you're Indian royalty and that you're willing to share a huge fortune with the person you are emailing with. If they could just help you get the money out of Switzerland. One idea is you could ask for their bank account number so you could transfer the money to the person for safekeeping, or maybe see if they'll advance you some money to cover the expense of transferring, which obviously you'll reimburse once you do wire the money. No, in reading this, I have to say, I was like, is this the Nigerian prince in real life? Is that what we're doing here?
Oh man, yeah. This one may have come from my spam folder.
Exactly. You're like, wait. That was actually a question for you. Would you help them get their money out?
Well, it's interesting though, because I think like if you were to talk to a government minister in India, they'd tell you that people not paying their taxes is one of the biggest like social problems they have, right? Like a former colleague of mine was like trying to buy a house in Mumbai, and he could not he had the money in cash to buy the thing, but nobody wanted to take it, and do a taxable transaction. Everyone wanted to do this like weird off the books thing, and trade that way. Right. So like I don't know how to feel about the bumps in the road, because like you say, who knows if this is actually there illegally or whatever.
Right.
But it's certainly I think for the good to have a government able to tax its citizens for the goods and services that they consume and provide.
Yeah, I don't think we need to spend a ton of time giving advice to people with Swiss bank accounts where they're hiding money. So
except for like get right with yourself. So I think
exactly.
Yeah, this next one is a classic example of the idiosyncratic risk, though.
Okay.
I run a venture-backed startup in Austin, and the firm that led my A round is based in China.
Okay.
I love working with them, but worry that the trade war will somehow affect their ability to follow on in later rounds of funding and doom our company. Am I wrong to worry about this? What should I do?
I don't think you're wrong to worry about this, dear venture-backed startup founder. I think the first thing for maybe the audience is to say that it is a Series A financing is usually your first kind of big financing. It can be, $5 million to $50 million, but it usually means you have some kind of a product market fit, and you're beginning the process of scaling your company. And so you're raising real money, and the people who lead your A will generally have governance rights over your company, and there will be an expectation on the part of future investors that A investor will continue to support the company at at the next rounds.
Yeah, because presumably they know it really well. They've been involved. They've seen all the stuff. And if they were to kind of opt out, that would be a pretty big red flag.
I mean, it's the kiss of death, really. I mean, as somebody who's taken a few Series A's in companies, like it's the kiss of death if they don't follow on. It's hard enough to raise a Series B or really to raise any external capital to do just about anything. When you're one of the key heuristics for assessing whether or not you're doing well is kind of broken. So the Series A investor re-upping at the Series B is that heuristic. Everybody wants to see that. And so if they don't, it can just kill your company independent of what your company's doing. So the first thing I thought actually is like, now you have a great reason for explaining to other investors why your Series A investor didn't re-up.
It's a free one. Yeah, that's a great
point. When the time comes, if they don't re-up, you can be like, oh, look, there's this huge problem with the China trade war. So that's great. You have a beautiful excuse. I think the second thing is probably more real, which is, will the U.S. block capital coming in, or will China block capital going out? I don't think the first one's a problem. The Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, what we call CFIUS, which reviews these transactions involving foreign investment in the U.S. I can't imagine they're going to be blocking, Series B venture deals. I think the bigger issue will be for the Chinese-based investor to get the capital out of China and get it into dollars and into your bank account. I saw, it was probably about 2 years ago, a few Chinese investors really struggling to get the money out of China and into the startups they had already made commitments to. That was something that was actually quite real because of the capital controls that were being put on outward capital movements. So I think that's something to pay attention to, but I haven't heard anything about that lately. So I'm not sure it's still a problem. I think the flow of capital is going to be free.
Hopefully. I mean, I saw, during the protests last week, a lot of people were taking out their Hong Kong dollars and converting them to US dollars. But, hard to tell if that's an act of protest or, a strategic action. But if, let's say you're in this, CEO seat, right? So all of these things are true. You get kind of a buy on somebody setting out your next fundraising, maybe. But if you don't want, and you maybe it'll be hard for the investor to get the cash out, and maybe they can mitigate that by transferring some cash over to the U.S. ex ante, so that they can fund you and all the other startups that they love and want to back. But is there a move to diversify your funding base that would not kind of complicate the governance situation in the startup unnecessarily?
I hear this way more on the asset manager side of thing, when you have a GP that's looking for LPs and wanting to have a diversity of LPs. It's pretty normal for a Series A round to be a single lead investor. Oftentimes investors have venture capital investors backing companies as opposed to LPs backing GPs. The investors into companies will often have minimum requirements that they need to obtain. So they need 20% of the company in order to meet their standard kind of protocol for doing a deal. In the fund space, it's actually the kind of different rule where the LPs often can't be more than 10% of the fund.
Yeah.
And so you see that diversification of funding much more on the kind of GP to LP side than you do on the company side. So I haven't really seen people saying, gosh, should I be taking money from this or that organization? It's usually personal. Mm-hmm. So is the person bringing you the capital going to help you achieve your goals? It rarely kind of morphs into a conversation about geopolitics. It usually is a conversation about what's your background, human being, and how are you, individual human being, going to help my company succeed?
Gotcha. So yeah, it's yet another reason to ignore the macro headlines, forget about Brexit, and throw the Wall Street Journal in the trash.
Yeah, I mean, basically, we just go to the beach. I mean, that's what this podcast is about. I think you can just stop worrying about the macro stuff and take a good book to the beach.
That's hey, I'm all for that. Except again, I in the time we've been recording this podcast, it started raining again, and Manhattan itself has disappeared from my view. So perhaps the beach is not the best.
Not your day. Is that Dorian coming up near you, or what is that?
Who knows? It could be. I think Dorian's still in North Carolina, though.
I think, yeah, you're probably right. It's probably not near you yet.
But so, in the absence of a trip to the beach, I actually have one more thing that we can worry about.
Let's do it.
Thank heaven. So this one comes from somebody who's a few years out of business school and is working at a multinational company that signed onto the Business Roundtable's recent statement about shareholder value. They say their words were nice, but nothing seems to have changed operationally. Should I whistleblow? Would anyone care? Would it help?
I love this question.
You love the idealistic people.
I do. I love the naive and idealistic people. I love them. What has it been? 2 weeks? I think we all figured capitalism would be solved by now. And and so here's what I thought of on what I would do. I think I would first I'd enlist some friends because my plan involves popping 400 bags of popcorn. And you're going to need some friends to do that and a few extra microwaves. And then what I would literally do is fill the CEO's office with popcorn to the ceiling, right to the ceiling. Don't half-ass that.
That works every time, actually.
It does.
It's startlingly effective.
To not half-ass it, because you need it to like if there's a window, you want people walking by to see that's popcorn in there. And then you leave a note on the CEO's door that says, each of your unfulfilled promises are like a single kernel of popcorn.
Huh.
And you can put a little like funny face on there. So that when the door opens, realization ensues. And for extra points, you can hide yourself in the popcorn.
Yep. Wow. That's a great little flourish. I mean, does it matter if we use like kettle corn or, kind of like the extra butter, no butter? Like, what's the technique there?
I think you're probably no butter. Otherwise, then you're going to damage the CEO's office.
Just to rough it up a little bit, like teach it a lesson, right?
That's right. I think we're going to need some patience.
Yeah.
I mean, I would love for somebody to pop that much popcorn and put it in their boss's office. But I think we're going to need some patience. These organizations have taken a big step in acknowledging the power of stakeholders and generating long-term sustainable performance. And it's probably going to take some while, what if it's taken 60 years to get to this point? It's probably going to take a few more years before we can mobilize that kind of mission in a kind of credible way.
Yeah.
So have a bit of patience. I love the idea of whistleblowing. Keep that whistle ready for when it's needed. I think 2 weeks is probably not enough time. Probably need a bit more time.
That's very mature. Yeah. I mean, I think the popcorn plan. If we could get like a Harvard Business School case study on that, if anyone's listening who has the power to make that happen. I think that could really catalyze some useful change.
Yeah. And, like the balls at the McDonald's Funland, that could work.
That's a good point. In a pinch. Yeah.
In a pinch, you could just create a ball pit.
Yeah. I think that's how they turned around GM during the financial crisis, actually.
I have a suspicion there's CEO offices in Silicon Valley that are ball pits because that's how we roll.
Yeah. Actually, I would have. I'm not going to lie. I've priced out installing a ball pit in my home many a time.
Yeah, they are fun.
But yeah, I think that about does it for us this week.
I think it does. Yeah.
Thank you all so much for listening along. This has been the Free Money Podcast, and it is not investment advice.
No,
not at all. But, except for chill out, go to the beach.
That is advice. It's not investment advice, but it's advice.
That's it. Exactly. But until next time, we love you. Bye.
Bye.